All right, hopefully you took another look at this question after we highlighted a few things. We know that these people bought their car for $9,000, but when they sold it to the dealership, they only got very little for it. They got 60% less than what they paid for it. So when you set this problem up, it's very similar to the example that we did together. You don't know how much money they lost on this car. The X doesn't represent how much money they got for it. It's how much money they actually lost, what they did not get for their car. And the 9,000 is the base amount for the problem. And of course, the 60%, the 60 is the P over 100. So a very, very simple ratio or proportion here. Cross multiply X times 100 and you get 100X. And then cross multiply with the other two values here. 9,000 times 60 does give you 540,000. So be careful with all those zeros there. So simple one-step equation, the inverse of multiplying by 100 is to divide by 100. So I'm going to divide both sides by 100 there. 100 divided by 100, that gives us our 1x that we need. And the 540,000 divided by the 100 leaves us with 5,400. Now the 5,400, this amount, we are talking about money, that represents how much they lost on the car. They didn't get that much for it. That's how much they lost on it after paying $9,000. If I want to know what price did they sell the car for, then I'm going to have to take the $9,000 that they paid for it originally and subtract out the 60% of that. And what that leaves me with is $3,600. So they did not get much for the car when they sold it to the dealership. So be very careful when you're answering word problems like this, just like with taxes if you're paying for something, or a discount if you're getting money off of something, that you finish out whatever the question is asking for. Now, we've got a couple more percent problems here that are very similar to the ones we've already done. There's just different information given to you in this problem. So just another look at solving these proportions. In this problem, it's very short, but it actually has a whole lot of information in it. The very first thing it gives you is the percent. It gives you 125%. So we already know up front what the p-value is for our proportion. Then it tells you of what number. The of is the base of that ratio. We don't know that base amount or that original amount for our problem. And then it tells you is 17.5. The is, that's the A. That's part of B. So they've given you a little bit different of a setup here for this problem, but it is just as simple to solve. So let's fill in the parts we know. 17.5 is the is part of our proportion, and we know equal sign is not showing up well. We know that the percent is 125. So we'll go ahead and fill that in, and that's over 100. So the one piece of information I don't know is the base amount, or the B, of what number. So simple cross multiplication, 17.5 times 100 is 1,750. And that equals, when you cross multiply the other direction, x times 125 is simply 125x. And now I'm down to a one-step equation. The inverse of multiplying by 125 is to divide by 125. And make sure if you divide the right-hand side by 125, you always have to divide the left-hand side by 125. And 1,750 divided by 125 gives you 14. and that equals 1x. 125 divided by 125 is 1. So what this tells you here is that 17.5 is 125% of 14. And 125% is more than your typical 100% that we see as a cap. So it does make sense that the part, the 17.5, is greater than the original base amount. So take that information and try this problem. Highlight what you need if that helps you to see the three different parts of this proportion. Now, same thing we have in this one that we had in the last one. We know the percent is 30. We know that it's asking us of what number, so we don't know the base amount. And they're giving us the part. So let's fill in. This is what your proportion should look like. 12.5 over x, or whatever variable you've chosen, equals 30 over 100. So cross multiply, very simple. 12.5 times 100 gives us 1,250. And that's going to be equal to, you cross multiply the other way, x times 30, which is just simply 30x. The inverse of multiplying by 30 is to divide by 30. So I'm going to divide the right hand side by 30, and I'm going to divide the left hand side by 30. And you do get a decimal here, and when you type this in, it is a repeating decimal, so please make sure that you change this to a mixed number. You will get 41.6 repeating, which is 41 2/3. So please make sure that you write that as a fraction, and that's equal to 1x. So 12.5 is 30% of 41 2/3. Alright, so let's take a look at the last thing we have here with percents, and that's a formula, the simple interest formula. This is actually very, very easy to use, and everything in your word problems are typically laid out for you fairly well to understand what to plug in, what values to plug in. But let's look at this, each individual piece here. The I is the interest. That's how much money you're going to make off of the amount you put in that the bank will give you. So that's your I, your interest. Your P is the principal amount. That's how much you put in originally into your bank. Your R is the annual interest rate. And what's important about that, I'm actually going to highlight it and then I'm going to underline it. It's written as a decimal. It's very important that you write your annual interest rate as a decimal. That's your R. And then the last one is your T, which is time in years. And so it's very important that if they give it to you in months, you've got to convert that into years. So time must be in years. So let's take a look at an example using this interest formula. For example 4, it starts out telling you that you deposited $840 into a savings account. So you deposited this amount. So that's your principal amount. That's how much your savings account has started with. Okay, assuming that there's not anything in there already. You've deposited $840 in that account. It goes on to tell you that you earn a simple interest rate for this account at 4.5% per year. Now this must be changed to a decimal. This is our rate. And one thing we have to remember, and let's go ahead and do that, is this has to be a decimal. Now I understand that it's already a decimal, but it's 4.5%. We still have this percent symbol here. So we've got to change that to just a decimal. Now percent is out of 100, so one way you could change this is divide 4.5 by 100. A shortcut that you all have been taught is to actually just move your decimal point 2 places. And once you move it, you fill in with your placeholder there was 0. So 4.5% is 0.045. That is 4.5% as a decimal, 0.045. So that's our R value. And it tells you that you want to keep your money in the account for 4 years. And so times in years, so that's easy. So the question asks, how much interest will you earn? All right, so I've tried to highlight the same colors that we had here for our interest formula. So let's plug in the values and all the information here. We do not know the interest, that's our I, but we do know the principal, which is $840. We're going to multiply that by our rate, which we have found to be 0.045, so it has to be in decimal form. And we're going to leave this money in our account for 4 years. So this one's very simple. It's not really solving an equation, it's more simplifying an expression. Just multiply those 3 pieces together, and the interest that you're going to gain on this account in 4 years is $151.20. So not a whole lot, but you have to think about how low your percentage rate was yearly. So simple interest, very easy to use. So once you take a look at this problem, pause the video and solve this problem. Alright, so hopefully you've highlighted some things in here. We'll go through this real quick. You deposit $125 in your savings account. This time it tells you that you have earned an interest rate of 1.75% and that your interest is $8.75. So a little bit different. What this one's actually asking for is how long was your money in the account. So when you're setting this problem up using your formula here, you actually know the I. You actually know you've only earned $8.75, so not very much. Your principal was $125. We're going to multiply that by our rate, which again, this rate must be changed to a decimal. So if I move my decimal point over 2 places, that gives me 0.0175. Always change to a decimal. So 0.0175. And what I don't know is the T, the time. So what you have to do with this problem, I'm going to bring my $8.75 down, is I actually have to solve an equation. Now this is all multiplication here, so I can go ahead and multiply my 125 times my 0.0175, and don't round. Actually write out the full decimal. It's 2.1875 T. And then divide both sides by that 2.1875. And what you do to the right hand side, make sure you do to the left hand side. And what this gives you, even though these are awful decimals, this gives you that it's going to take you 4 years. So all I've done is, and actually that's T that we've solved for, this divides out. All I've done is solve this equation for T, which was my time in years. So you didn't make very much money. You only made $8.75, and it took you 4 years to do that. So you can see that annual interest rates are not going to make you rich by any means. Alright, so hopefully percent problems are pretty simple for you. Right here, now you have your 3 summary questions. The first one and the second one are very easy percent questions, and then the question C there deals with your simple interest formula. So make sure you answer all 3 of those on your notes.